Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back for another week of the Max Potential Habits Show. Today, we have on an incredible guest. I found him on LinkedIn and we started a conversation. What caught my attention was his headline. And I noticed that he is trained by John Maxwell, who I've read lots of books by and love his work. So I thought, oh, hey, we've got to connect. And as I read through his bio, I saw all kinds of trigger words that I was like, yes, 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 yes. We need to have him on the show to talk about his areas of expertise. And pre-show, we got to have a really powerful conversation about emotional intelligence in the times that we're having right now during COVID, challenging relationships, stress, all the things that are going on in the world, where emotional intelligence is actually key to being able to navigate the terrain. So thanks for coming on the show, Ronnie Cunningham. It's so great to have you here.
My pleasure.
Awesome. So just a little background of Ronnie. He is a life transformation coach, and he focuses on emotional intelligence, empathy, relationships, and tough conversations during tough times. He has over 48 years of experience, of diverse experience throughout his career. He's worked in the civil services arena. I don't know if I said that right. Working in civil service, academia, private industry, nonprofit sector, and faith-based community. And today, one of his greatest passions is working with young adults. And so we're going to have all kinds of really great conversations about what he's done, where he's been, tips for you, especially in the emotional intelligence area. So let's get started. I like to I don't always ask this, but lately I've been asking. I'm curious if you could come up with a favorite quote that you feel like has aligned your life in powerful ways.
Over the years, there's been so many, but one that's really sticking with me is one by a mentor of mine, Dr. Paul Sheely, and he says the true purpose of education is to liberate the personal genius within.
Ooh.
And I just love that piece because it changes the perspective on how we look at those we share our wisdom with.
Ooh, I like that a lot. The personal genius within. Liberate the personal genius within.
Yes.
That's great. Oh, that's so powerful, because I think a lot of us walk through life thinking that other people are special and other people have certain gifts, but somehow we're missing that. And I believe that every single one of us has a genius living inside.
It's something that I wish academia would adopt, because if they did, we look at students differently. We don't try to label them as what they are. It becomes our responsibility to pull that personal genius outside of them.
Yeah. Yeah. The word adjunct is a Latin word that means to draw out from within.
Yes.
And that's exactly what that is, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really powerful. Here's a total tangent, but not really, because you're an educator and have been in academia for so long. What do you see? What kind of system would you create to help draw out the personal genius within?
One that's more focused on teaching how to learn rather than what to learn. Put it simply, I think that if we teach people how to learn, they have the ability to learn anything they want to learn. We're in an area where the technology is so far advanced over where it was even 20 years ago, that let a person learn and grow in the area of their strengths rather than where their parents or where teachers or where other people think that they should grow in. I have success because I ask students or youth, how can I help you? Instead of trying to tell them what I think they need to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really values driven instead of curriculum driven. When my kids were little, my ex-husband and I actually homeschooled, and we did unschooling. So it was based on letting them lead the way of what they wanted to learn, instead of forcing, in first grade, you're supposed to learn this. And then second grade, you're supposed to learn this. And it was pretty incredible. I think it's that idea that no matter whatever it is that you're inspired to do, you will figure out reading, math, whatever it is that you need to know, you'll end up learning it yourself because you're inspired to learn that, instead of forcing someone and then they get resistant to it and they lose their creativity.
Well, it's like putting the brakes on. If you have a person, you're trying to force a person down a certain path that they don't want to go in, they're going to be resistant.
Yeah.
A wise mentor of myself told me that people like to be led, not pushed.
Yeah.
And if we lead them along and lead them in an area that they have interest on, you're going to get better results all the time, I believe.
That's great. I love that. It's the difference between motivation and inspiration, right? Like where the motivation is pushing people and forcing, and inspiration is that leader within that wants to come out and do what you're inspired to do and take spontaneous action. Yeah.
I think we get much better results if academia embraced that, and the quote that I shared with you earlier. I think it would change the whole paradigm that we operate under.
Absolutely. Okay. Tell us a little bit of your backstory, because I know you said that you have experienced a lot of challenging times. What led you where you are today in terms of being so inspired to help youth and to make a difference in the world in the ways that you do?
Well, looking back on a number of things, but looking back, between kindergarten and 12th grade, I went to 13 different schools. My parents divorced when I was 5 years old, and I was at a very unstable childhood. And the reason I moved around so much because I got in a lot of trouble. I was tagged as Bad Little Ronnie, and I lived up to that name. Everywhere I went, I got in trouble. I would be in a number of fights, and my father told me one day, "You better not have another fight." Well, I had to figure out another way to go into a school and not getting in fights. And wherever I went, the girls would give me attention a little bit. And even at a young age, and the guys didn't like that. So they'd want to fight. So that's how I got into so many fights. Well, after my father gave me that ultimatum, I had to figure out another way to handle things. So I started acting crazy. I found out that people don't mess with you if they think you're not wrapped too tight. They leave you alone. And it worked, but it got me in a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble. So anyway, at 15, I left my father's house, and last 51 years, I've been pretty much on my own, and had a number of incidents, a number of challenges over my lifetime. One that turned me to the youth was in 2006. I lost a 23-year-old son, Ryan, to an auto accident. And one of my mentors had shared with me that we've got to learn, about a month before I lost Ryan, he shared with me, we've got to find ways of finding good in a bad experience. So I really had to pray on that. How am I going to find good out of losing a son? Well, I prayed on it for a while. And what came to me is, you don't have to worry about Ryan. Ryan's okay. But you could be a blessing for youth around the world. And I'm like, okay, those are some pretty broad steps on it. But I started researching, looking at the numbers, and I was astounded to find their population. They're about 70, the millennials and Gen Zs are about 70% of the world's population. That's about 4.5 billion. And it's a huge task. And we say they're our future, but we really don't seem to put our money where our mouth is. And that's the biggest challenge. And it's one that I believe communities have to be brought together. One of my backgrounds, I've spent some time with the city of Los Angeles in emergency management. And during that, I realized that it's the communities. It's not the states or federal government that have to rebuild things after a catastrophic event. It's the communities. So my focus is, one of the challenges that I'm going to be doing is bringing communities together. The family and the community units need to be restored. And you have strong families, strong communities. Then you have strong states and a stronger nation. We've got to find a more effective way of working together with one another. We've got to find ways of collaborating. And I believe it all starts with families and communities.
Well, you just out of curiosity, what does emergency management mean? Will you say more there?
Well, after we had some success, and I mentioned my journey with John Maxwell, at a low point in my life, a marriage had fell apart. I come off of 31 years, of drug and alcohol use. I was at a low point in my life. I didn't have any coping skills, and I stopped drinking in 2000. And I got exposed to John Maxwell. Well, his 21 irrefutable laws of leadership ended up helping me put my life back together. The program that I was working on in the city of Los Angeles was called the Systematic Code Enforcement Program. And I was directly involved in a program that ended up winning a Harvard's Innovations in Government Award. that program, we improved the living conditions of 2.5 million renters in the city of Los Angeles and caused over $2 billion of reinvestment in the city's housing rental stock. Well, all of a sudden, I start feeling a little bit better about myself. I wasn't the beat down person, you know. So I started developing, and after I retired, I joined the John Maxwell team. But what I had done in the years before that, the 13 years from 2000 to 2013, John's material had such an impact on me that I started buying his stuff and teaching it for free. And I love quotes. So Zig Ziglar says that, you know, a lot of people are afraid to train their employees because they train them and they leave. So Zig says, how about if you don't train them and they stay? Well, I was one of the supervisors that after we won the Harvard Award, I got promoted to principal inspector. And after we won that award, well, I started taking time to develop my staff. And guess what? They started promoting. They started going to Water and Power, to the LA Police Department, to DWP, to the police department, to the library, to Public Works, community development. But every time I lost an employee, I had a line of people ready to fill that vacancy because they knew that I poured into people. And I just kind of developed some of the training, some of the things that John did. And I said, this works. So when it come time to retire, I said, wow, I can do this and get paid for it. It's kind of like a no-brainer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then later that led me to a journey where I got into emotional intelligence, and that changed my trajectory a little bit more.
Nice. I love this. What I was thinking is you unleashed your personal genius within and that you were really training leaders out of leaders. And that's such a powerful skill set and desire, because you're right. Some people don't want to train people to be leaders because then they know exactly, oh, you'll leave. But what if you just had a constant flow of that? And what an incredible, really amazing story. Yeah, it says a lot about your heart.
Well, one of the things, Dr. A, that I did is I shared with the group of inspectors that I had to train. I said, my goal is to train you, and I want all of you to do much better than me. Mm-hmm. And I said, if by chance you all rise and create a vacuum, you'll pull me up with you. And
yeah,
it works.
That's great. I mean, it's such a win-win mentality, right? Instead of divisiveness and separation and keeping people down so that you stay on top, it's like, oh, let's create a whole bunch of win-wins together.
And where we are with our youth, there's not enough of us coaches or adults to be able to reach them.
Yeah.
So we have to have a model that we train leaders to help them develop other leaders, because, you know, and that's why I like working with the millennials, because they're in a position to reach up and down. They can pull somebody up as they're being mentored to also. And I believe that that's a model that we need to implement on a more wide scale than we do now.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we get into emotional intelligence, and I want to hear your take on what that means, I'm curious for you. I would imagine that after 31 years of substance use, quitting is challenging. Would you be willing to share a little bit how you did that? What happened for you there?
Well, I became a person, at the same time, I became a person of faith. And I had been my own God for 45 years. I thought I had it all going. And, you know, I had a failed relationship where a wife had left me. And I was one of those that thought no woman in the world could possibly leave me, not me. Maybe anybody else, but not me. So I was broken. So when I said my coping, I learned how to cope all over. The drugs, alcohol, these were how I coped. And now I was at a point where I had promised that I prayed and promised that if I stopped drinking and smoking and doing the things that I did, that I would never touch it again. And I'm happy to say I've got 20 years of sobriety, but it wasn't an easy thing. I had to really learn how to cope. I had feelings and emotions that I had never knew about, that I had been medicating all these years. I'm riding down the street and some little drops started rolling down my cheeks, and I almost, tears, me? Are you kidding me? I couldn't believe it, but it's reality. And one of the things is that too many of us don't want to talk about. When I work with the youth today, I share the things that I'm most embarrassed about. Not my successes. I share the things that I'm ashamed of. And that transparency helps me bond with them in a way that, you know, I'm not trying to act like I got it all together. I'm still a work in progress. It's going to take me time. I'm working daily on it. This is part of the thing. But they see too much hypocrisy everywhere. People try to act like they've got it all together. And the reality is we're all a mess. I ask people, how many of you are from dysfunctional families? When everybody should be raising their hands, one or two may say, well, we got some issues. No, we all have issues. That's the reality.
Yeah.
That's the reality.
So true. And you're so right. It's such a gift, especially with younger people, to open the door for them to share those dark, scary, shameful places, because it's such a toxic problem when you got to hold on to that and you can't share it with anyone because you don't see any models sharing their messiness with you. So many people are putting on masks and performances that it's hard to know what's real.
And one thing that really, really spoke out to me is, like I said, my pastor had introduced me to John and took me through his 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. But one day I was in there and I gave a testimony and I talked about my failed marriage, about me losing a fortune, about my drug and alcohol use. And I got out afterwards. I told him at one point, my pride would have kept me from sharing that in front of a packed church. But I said, I don't care what any of you think about me. It's what my Creator thinks about me. Well, after that, I got out to the vestibule area and a girl came to me, 12 years old. And she just grabbed me and started hugging me and said, thank you, Mr. Cunningham, thank you. And I'm looking at the ceiling like, what in the world did I say that can cause this? And she's crying like crazy and squeezing me tighter and tighter. I'm glad she was only 12 because she might have taken all the air out of me. So I says, what is it? I asked her, what is it? And she looked at me and she said, there's hope. I said, what do you mean? She says, my daddy's an alcoholic. And if you could be healed, he could be healed. I started crying after that. And I had to ask myself, would I be willing to embarrass myself in front of 1 million people just to have one young child react like she did? Of course. Because what other people think about us isn't important. But what that young child did, giving her some hope,
Yeah.
in the world. So that's when I realized the value of true transparency.
Yeah.
That was another one of those defining moments in my life and my journey.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, my eyes filled up with tears, and you're so right. It's those moments when you don't even know that of course you're there doing this, whatever, I'm sure you had like a packaged speech a little bit, but it's like, you don't know who you're going to affect and how and why. Right. And everybody needs to hear those human stories of struggle and messiness because we are all that way. I think it's so fascinating how we can have the perception that no one else is struggling. And then one of the greatest gifts, like one of the things I love most about group coaching is that people realize like, oh, it's not just me that's struggling with this. It's like, oh, they struggle with it. They struggle with it. They struggle with it. And then it releases that feeling of I'm alone and isolated. And I think it's so powerful. So thank you. I love that. And that hope piece, right? If we are living in a place of a lack of hope, it makes everything seem pretty grim, but there is so much hope. I think that's how I see the world.
We're in the same boat there.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So let's talk emotional intelligence. What does emotional intelligence mean to you first? Let's come up with your definition of what that means.
Emotional intelligence is something that can't be described easily because it affects everything we do. How we think, how we interact with people, how we handle adversity, how we process information. It just affects everything. Our feelings and emotions are everything. We all have them, but most of us have had very little training in learning how to manage them. As I shared with you, I had no training. And when I had insecurities when I was 14 years old and somebody handed me a joint or a bottle of wine or beer, that was how I dealt with my emotions, the things that I wasn't happy about in my life. I tried that. Some people ask me if I ever wondered about my parents and ever felt bad about why I moved around so much. No, because they weren't the problem, I was the problem. And learning how to manage my feelings and emotions was something that didn't come until many, many decades later.
Yeah. When you were sharing your story of substance use, I was thinking that it's so tied to emotional intelligence, right? Like most of us will find ways to escape the pain because we don't know how to cope with what's painful. And as animals, I talk a lot about how we live by the pleasure pain principle, and we definitely try our hardest to avoid pain and seek pleasure. So if we don't have the skills to deal with the pain that we're faced with, we're going to do the easiest, most quick option to have that instant gratification, which, like when you're using substances, it's like, oh yeah, I can feel really good in this moment. It might not help you tomorrow, but it helps right this minute. And it's easier.
We self-medicate. The self-medication doesn't just mean drugs and alcohol. It could be sex. It could be video games. It could be whatever is escape to take us out of it.
Yeah.
It could be a movie.
Yeah.
And we get obsessed and we overdo it and we overbalance. But the thing is, as you mentioned, it's only a temporary fix.
Yeah.
The problem doesn't go away. You still got it. You're still going to keep it. It just becomes perpetual.
Yeah. Yeah. So share with listeners. I'd love to hear your take on, I know we've talked about how it'd be amazing to have a school system that teaches some of these, teaches students how to have emotional intelligence and those life skills that are really essential for learning for self-love, how to cope, how to communicate. So what are some of the key foundational emotional intelligence skills that you could share with the audience?
Well, it all starts with self-awareness. Now, there's two models of emotional intelligence now. One that's kind of emotional intelligence is deemed for adults, which is what Daniel Goleman came out with around 1995. But what's happening and what I'm really inspired by is an organization called CASEL, the Collaborative Academic for Social and Emotional Learning. And what they're based out of Chicago, and they're doing some amazing work with teaching these skills to the youth. And one of the things that differ from emotional intelligence versus CASEL is they have a component in there called responsible decision making. Mm. Normal components of emotional intelligence are self-awareness, self-management, then empathy and social awareness, and then relationship responsibility, which is another, relationships are another area that we're given very little training in, and everything we do involves other people and relationships.
Yeah.
Many of us have had many failed relationships because we didn't know how to nurture them. We didn't know how to understand. We didn't have the self-awareness. We're looking for happiness through someone else. There's a lot of, we can just go on and on all these pieces because they're realities. And why emotional intelligence is so important, I believe, I don't have the empirical data, but I believe in time, we'll find that divorce rates will go down. We'll find suicide rates will go down. We'll find drug and alcohol use will go down through the widespread training and application of the emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I was thinking even, you could extend that to pretty much every area of life or business, right? I mean, there's a lot of cool research now to show that the greatest leaders of companies have really high EQ. And it's based on them being able to tap into that empathy piece, get to know, to create win-win relationships instead of having this, domination, subordination model of hierarchy in a company. So it's every area. I can't think of an area that emotional intelligence wouldn't benefit.
And it's one of those areas. My generation, when I was coming up, all of the focus and subsequent generations like yours, probably decades or a couple of generations after mine, what was happening is all the focus was going on IQ.
Yeah.
Your intellectual quotient. And all of us know people that are brilliant, absolutely brilliant, but they may have the personality of this ink pen. They can't relate to people. And what we found out about emotional intelligence is that we don't have to know everything. If we have the ability to network and bring people to the table that have things that we don't have, we have much greater chances for success than having a high IQ. A lot of research has shown that 80% of our success in life is in direct proportion to the level of our emotional intelligence. It's valuable.
Yeah.
It's valuable.
Yeah.
And we have the technology now. We have the DISC, the Myers-Briggs, all these tools to help us gain the self-awareness that we lack. And if you don't have the self-awareness, if you don't know where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, you're just kind of there. If you have emotions that you don't know how to manage them, you're not in a good place. So the more you once you understand what, that self-awareness, then you can begin to start managing those feelings and emotions.
Yeah, will you share just some really practical action steps people can take to develop their self-awareness?
Well, just by learning what they really are about, by going introspective. We're in a society where it's easy to look and blame other people for the reasons why they are, but really taking a journey in. In my recovery and my going through it, I had to take a look at myself. I had to define what I was, who I was, and I had to be truthful with myself. Sometimes when you take that journey within, there's some ugliness in there that you may not like, that you got to deal with it.
Yeah.
And we talk about relationships. After I had failed, I had to start, okay, I want a woman that's this, I want my next wife, I want this, that. And then I had to ask my question, am I the type of person that's going to attract that type of woman?
Yeah.
I had a lot of work to do here. Whereas many times we want to try to look at it where I want to find somebody, and we're not realistic. So
yeah.
being real with yourself, asking yourself questions, and focusing on ourselves rather than others.
Yeah. I always love this saying, you need to become who you want to be with. It's funny. And I think it relates to that idea of like, if we're looking outside for someone to fix us, we're going to look outside for someone who's, I want to attract this person who's amazing, brilliant, sexy, smart, rich. But if we're not that, we're looking for them to try to make us that instead of just being who we are and developing yourself. So it's so powerful. I mean, I'm thinking for self-awareness, what were some of the things you did? I mean, for me, I've done meditation, journaling, tons of personal growth and development work, like reading books and podcasts and workshops and changing my friend groups. And I mean, I have like, the sky's the limit to change from where I was to where I am today. And I think that, I tell people the number one habit is personal growth and development, which to me is self-awareness. It's personal empowerment. It's unleashing the genius within. It's like all those things where the gold comes from is you creating the most powerful relationship you can with yourself, which is to me emotional intelligence. It's raising your EQ. And I don't, it's funny because the IQ thing, I agree with you. We used to have so much focus on IQ, and now it's like, first of all, it's how do you measure IQ really? And there's a lot of skewed perspectives about what that test is anyway. But, I think about the greatest people in the world who are the most successful and have the largest impact is because they make other people feel empowered.
Absolutely.
Which is an EQ thing.
Yes. And it's a soft skill. It's something that we all need and that we all have to be aware of. I love the debate going on about the STEM versus the soft skills, but as we move forward, the jobs that many of us knew in the past aren't going to be there. We got to create new things, and the emotions, working with others, the networking, all of these are components to help people grow. And, as you grow personally, your personal development, you start finding out others. And we mentioned the empathy component. You can start understanding other people, and other people will help you understand yourself. So there's an interdependency that exists that we don't take advantage of. And one other thing that you mentioned, Doctor, you mentioned the change word. Too many of us are afraid to change. And I like John's quote is that there's no growth in the comfort zone and no comfort in the growth zone.
That's a good one.
Get out of our comfort zone.
Yes. It's like the comfort zone is a curse.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes, it is. And it limits us because we're locked in and we don't go beyond. And one of my things is, after spending 60 years in California retiring, I decided to move to Georgia where all my brothers and sisters were. Where I had brought my mother out here to live with them the last few years of her life. And it was out here that I met my current wife, who happens to live in Colorado. So if I had never left my comfort zone of Southern California, I would have never come out here and found her.
Yeah.
We don't know what's outside of that comfort zone until we step beyond it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you recommend for people to step out of their comfort zone a little bit?
Well, like you said, you mentioned the personal development. That is one of the things. I'm committed to become a lifelong learner. During the years that I had my drug and alcohol use, I was trying to get rid of the brain cells that I had, where now it's all about trying to make the best out of what I had left. And personal development is the key, and it's a lifelong process. Somebody once shared with me something, and I'm a person who grew up in the 60s, so I'll date myself by the terminology, but they said if you're too hip to listen and too hip to learn, two hips make an ass. And there's some truth to that.
That's a good one.
You have to always be willing to learn. Too many adults, they want to do the thinking for their children. You know, too many kids tell me that their parents think they know it all. They always tell them when I was 16, hey, 16 today isn't like it was when I was 16 or when you 16. It's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, what you're talking about is we don't help our children cultivate emotional intelligence and empathy when we don't let them critically think for themselves.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like part of that process is learning, bumping up against things, stepping out of your comfort zone, making mistakes, failing, falling, getting up, figuring it out, talking about it. You know, it's like there's a lot of overprotection sometimes of kids because we're afraid of what could happen, but really then there's this stifling that goes on and not giving them the tools for connection to understand the journey of growth. You know, it's go for it. You want to say something? I want to hear what you have to say.
Part of the problem is, and this is something that my research and my observations, it's okay for us to want our children to be better and do better than we did. Where we've gone wrong is we want to take the component of adversity out of their life. And they have to learn from mistakes. They have to learn that it's okay to fail. That doesn't define you. And when you remove the adversity, it's like I use the thing, what happens if we try to help a butterfly out of a cocoon? Guys, it needs that struggle to become strong enough to live. We're no different.
Yeah.
And if we're not allowing our kids to think, if we're not, and one of the things that I really, another connecting piece when I ask the youth, I ask them, what do they think about something? Some of them almost have to grab their chair. You care what I think? They tell me that my parents don't care. All they want to do is tell me what to do and how I should think. And coming back to emotional intelligence, one of the things that we've got to understand is everybody has their own feelings and emotions. And one of the worst things, whether it's a parent, whether it's a spouse or a friend, one of the worst things we can do is try to tell somebody how they should feel or how they should think. They think and feel because that's how they think and feel.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. But we want to try to tell, well, you should think this way, or you should think that way. No, that's wrong. And we've created a dependency to the level that people don't develop critical thinking skills because others are thinking for them.
Yeah, you know, you pointed out something I think that's really powerful, as well as holding a space to let someone else share themselves with you. And I think if you treat kids like they need to be super protected, and you're not letting them flourish from cocoon to butterfly because you think that you can't let them fall down. I mean, that'd be like when they start walking, they fall down and you stop it. You know, oh, you can't, I don't want you to ever try to walk because you might fall down and hurt your knee. That's not going to work. But then there's this place where I don't think that there's enough. I'll use a quote. I love that you love quotes too. Brene Brown says, people are hard to hate close up, move in. You know, so it's this idea of like, let's get to know each other. Let's care more about each other. Let's ask the questions. I had a really amazing opportunity to interview gang members for my dissertation research. They're incarcerated men, gang members. And, you know, it's like I interviewed a whole bunch of white supremacists, and I interviewed like the sky's the limit people, like murdered people, like really intense stuff. And, you know, sitting in the room with them and asking them questions. I mean, they're crying and they're like, you're the only person that's ever asked me in my life how I feel or what happened to me, or, you know, it was just like, and then they'd share things with me and say, you're the only person I've ever told this to. And it was just, you know, some of these guys are 50 years old, you know, and it's just like, you know, like no one cared about what they thought or what they felt or what they experienced. And of course the outcome is going to be, you know, a criminal lifestyle because that was their place to connect and that's what they knew. And so I think about that a lot, you know, how powerful it is just to have a connected conversation with somebody. like we're all longing for that.
And that's where the empathy piece comes in. If I want to understand you, it's not about me telling you about my accomplishments or my family or my that. I want to understand you. How do you feel? Why do you think, why do you feel this way? Why do you think that way? Can you share something? Do you mind being genuinely concerned with what the person, who the person is, where they are, understand why they're where they are. It takes effort, but it'll bring you that moment of truth. Like you said, nobody's ever asked me that before. Wait a minute, you're 50 years old, and because we haven't been, this underscores where academia, another area that I think academia has failed by not giving us these soft skills, is all the connections, majority of the connections out there are very superficial. We ask a person, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. No, how are you really doing? I could tell by the way you're acting, you're not in a good place. You may say you're fine, but you're emoting a lot different than you being fine.
Yeah.
Would you like to share it with me? And not in a way where you're prying into them, that you letting the person know that you care about them.
Yeah.
The difference in the world.
Go for it.
No, it's a shame because a lot of our youth don't feel the connection from those who love them the most, their parents. And that's why the teen suicide rates are really going up. They feel disconnected.
Well, and we're so busy, right? And what you're saying, what it really is it takes that pivotal shift to presence and self-awareness. Because if you're so busy with your day doing your thing, and when you ask someone how they're doing and they respond and you're not really paying attention because you're not present, because you're in your mind thinking about all the to-do list, you're not going to notice that the person doesn't feel good. And we do that with our kids, and we do it with people we run into at the store, and we do it with, people we work with. And to me, that powerful piece of just being present, which is one of the hardest things there is to do, is one of the greatest gifts that you can give the world, I think.
There's a short story that really checked me and how I found myself, because I'm really focus driven, a personality. When I worked with the Los Angeles Housing Department, I went into clerical units, through the clerical unit, and I went over there, and one of my inspectors was over at the copy machine. And I asked him, what are you doing this weekend? His name was Ernesto. And he got excited. He had a great weekend. As soon as I grabbed my piece off the coffee, I was gone. Now, Monica, our senior clerk typist, came over and she says, that was wrong what you did to Ernesto. I said, what are you talking about? She says, you asked him what he was doing this weekend, and he was really ready to tell you, excited, and then you just took off. And I said, I sure did, didn't I? So I had to go back over there and ask him. I pulled up a chair and sat down. I said, I apologize for that. I got so many things on my mind. Like you said, we're busy, but that's no excuse. Imagine how that made the person feel if I had a chance to fix that only because she pointed it out to me.
Yeah, good for her.
I'll probably do this quite often. I know.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, the people that I work with and just even, I think about it from a parenting perspective often because I'm a parent, but it's like also this space of like in parenting, I remember being told, how do kids feel loved? Time. Spending time with them, quality time, looking into their eyes, asking about their day, seeing what they're doing, so that was always such an important thing to me. And because of the busy society that we live in these days, time is one of the most lucrative, profitable things that we can offer to somebody. And so, it's like really showing up in that powerful way. And the truth is it falls under, to me, the law of giving and receiving, where you go like, the more you give, the more you get. So if you're stuck in a place, for everyone listening, if you're stuck in a place feeling like your life is not flowing the way you want it to, start giving of yourself, give of your time, be empathetic, ask how someone else is doing, stop hyper-focusing on yourself and give something and see what shifts, because it's such a powerful gift that you can give.
Absolutely. And you bring to mind another quote that a mentor shared with me: genuine help is always mutual. And a lot of us, we don't want to help unless we feel that we're going to be reciprocated in some way. But when you give without expecting any return at all, and this could be to anybody, there's a mutual benefit that comes back to you some kind of way. I truly believe that.
Yeah. So awesome. Oh, such a juicy conversation. I love this. Thank you so much. I never know, I can't say I never know, but usually I don't know what course the conversation's going to take, and it's usually a winding one, but it always is so fulfilling. Like I leave these interviews just like, yes, because I get to connect with you, and I always hope my people that I'm talking to get to feel that way too. And then I know listeners are just, it's that place of relaxation where you get to hear other people's thoughts and feelings and perspectives and walk away inspired. And that's something that's really important to me. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and feelings.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed this, and
Yeah.
one of the things that I've always wanted to do, and this is maybe stemming back from my drinking days or whatever, I've always wanted to control the situation.
Yeah.
You have so little control, just let it flow. Just see.
Yes.
Just let it go.
It's so true. That's one thing I've really worked on in the last year is surrender, letting go of control, surrendering, letting the universe provide. And it's been so much more fun.
And the reality is we have so much less control than we think we do anyway.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I know it's such a facade, right? I think it's the comfort zone thing. It's like, oh, if I stay in control and I make a plan and I force it to happen or try to force it to happen, I feel comfortable and safe. Whereas when we say, I'm just going to let go and surrender, it feels a little scary, but there is no such thing as control, really.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So share with us, what are the top 3 max potential habits that you believe got you where you are today?
Well, being a person of faith, this last 20 years is when I really came to life, I would say. So faith, intentionality, and determination are the key things that are growing, that are driving me in my personal growth.
Nice.
Right? And that's for 45 years, that wasn't the case. I was not a person of faith. I was pretty spontaneous. Now I'm very intentional, and I'm realizing that I'm in the 4th quarter now. It's not like I'm in the half now, or at halftime, as Bob Uecker would say. I'm in the 4th quarter, so I've got to, instead of counting the days, I got to make my days count.
Love it. I love it. Yeah, you could be in the 3rd quarter, right? Yeah.
I'll take it if it's a gift, but
okay.
I've got more of a sense of urgency. And again,
yeah,
I've got grandkids now.
Yeah.
A better future for them. And that's not going to they're not going to have that if I just rest on my laurels and my past success. I've got to contribute, do what I can to influence people to help make it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's such a beautiful place to live, where you live every day as if it's the 4th quarter, right? You just go like, I'm going to make a difference every day that I possibly can. And I'm going to, this is called max potential habits. I think of it as like, what do we want to do to reach our max potential in life? Not that I think you ever get all the way there, but I think as when you're striving for that and you're working to be the best person that you can possibly be and taking that action every day, life gets so much more rich and rewarding. It's like I'm using the gifts that I was given to share with the world and make an impact, and then I receive in return, right? So it's just this lovely sharing, and I'm noticing.
Losing a son at 23 years old. He was 23. I'm a cancer survivor. Life has a way of helping you see things that you didn't see when you were youthful. And I lost a lot of loved ones that are no longer here, that have poured into me. And I realized, you start reflecting on, I didn't get here by myself. I had a lot of love. I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of love poured into me. And I've been fortunate enough to see things that many people haven't seen. And, a lot of the young guys that I grew up with, they're in the cemetery, they're in prison, or they've lost their mind to drugs.
Yeah.
So I have a responsibility to do what I can to help prevent the next generation from having that same destiny.
Yeah.
Much as I can. Can't save the world, but I can do what I can.
Well, I would so imagine that. I think that for most listeners, if they have kids, that would be one of the most challenging things to experience, is losing a child.
The most challenging. Nothing comes close to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would trade with him in a heartbeat if I could, but we don't get that choice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's big. I mean, it's impressive that you've used that experience as an opportunity to grow and help other people. Because that definitely isn't the path that everyone would take with that happening.
Well, I believe we're really here to help other people, but
yeah,
society doesn't teach that. They teach us you're here for yourself, and that's not what we're here for.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know that because of the work you do.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. So good to have you on. Okay, so share with us. I know that you're involved in all kinds of cool stuff. Will you share with listeners who want to connect with you the best places to find you?
Yes. Right now, Growth by Design Pasadena is one of my websites. But one of the things that, another one that as far as my community, my work with the youth, is ryonsvillage.org. That site is being rearranged. There's a lot of information out there, but I'm going to offer some courses to help bring communities together. So that'll be one. Growth by Design Pasadena.com. That's for personal development.
Okay.
Personal development, emotional intelligence. But there are some others that I'm working on, because one of the things that I've realized living in Georgia and Colorado, I still got roots in California. We're in a technology, just like what you're doing, that our reach is broader than it's ever been in any time in history. We're not limited to our own community. We could have a reach all around the world. And I actually mentor people in different parts of the world, some parts that I've never even been to.
So cool.
Yeah. Cool.
It is incredible, right? The global outreach that we get to have just by a podcast or like website, or so amazing. Okay, wonderful. I will put both of those in the show notes. And of course, you can find Ronnie on LinkedIn, which is where we found each other. So Ronnie Cunningham on LinkedIn. And I'll have all of these in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on today. I really, really enjoy getting to have these deep conversations with like-minded people who leave listeners feeling inspired and having those thoughts of like, wow, you've had so many challenges in your history, and here you are making a really beautiful impact in the world. So thank you for coming on to share.
It's my pleasure. And if I could leave you with one of my quotes.
Yes.
We grow by intention, or we shrink by default.
Ooh, that's a mic dropper. That's a good one. I like that. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to come to you when I need some quotes.
Got tons of them over the years.
Awesome. Me too. I love quotes. Like, all-time favorite. All right. Thanks for coming on the show today. And everyone, thank you for being here to listen. This show wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. So thank you for being here each and every week to support, to listen, to cheer, to grow, to connect together. It is my favorite thing to create community around optimizing yourself, getting inspired, doing what it takes to fulfill your vision, and making a difference in the world. So I hope that you all have an incredible week where you thrive and you feel alive and you get inspired to grow and not shrink. I'll be back next week. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Max Potential Habits podcast. If you're liking what you've heard, it would be so incredibly awesome if you would subscribe to the channel and leave a 5-star rating and a written review. This helps me help more people while we grow our NFA community so we can rock it out together. For Max Potential Habits resources, go to nfacoaching.com, where you can access all of my resources. There's free ebooks, PDF checklists, a journal template, a business mindset meditation kit, and so much more. Plus, links to NFA coaching on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And if you're super serious about up-leveling, there's also a link to schedule a free consult to work with me in group or one-on-one coaching. Until next time, I hope you have a Max Potential Habits Day where you get inspired to do whatever it takes to transform into the most empowered version of yourself so you can lead a rich, thriving, kick-ass life and business.